Southern Delaware School of the Arts. And one of the higher readings I hired the son of the superintendent as a teacher. And we got along really well, and he was a great teacher. So then I started teaching at Florida College 3-4 years later. He sent me an email. He just said he appreciated me because he wanted to be a principal. One thing that stuck with him, he never heard me say a foul word in 7 years. Of course, I said it on the playground, not in the driveway, you know. So, probably,
But he wasn't looking at
that's right. So, you know, people do listen, and it doesn't matter who they go to as people that they think would be semi-honorable, you know.
Right. How many of us have been in situations where we're looking for
the scope is much bigger than that. In fact, it's generational, really. I know I'm impacted, I know, by my grandparents still, and even my great-grandparents before them. Their choices ripple into my life, even though I knew some of them not at all, or some of them very, very poorly, but their effect is still continues to influence me in some ways. And my life, one way or another, will influence others too. And just like this, we tend to avoid sadness, and yet he says, actually, sadness leads your heart to be glad. There's a depth to it that's actually maybe surprisingly good for us and turns into something that I don't anticipate it to be, but it's actually very good. And in the end, it gives me something joyful actually to think about. Right. And it takes wisdom to see that and not to either silo my life into little moments, but to see it's a continuum. And so it's kind of the idea of what Paul said there in Ephesians 3 and a couple of times, that there's width and breadth and depth and height to God's love. There's dimension to all of that. And there's dimension to us as we bear God's image and we are eternal people as well. So this call to find the meaning of life is much bigger than what I tend to focus on, which is the right now. And we've talked a lot of these early chapters, what all those things might be. There's something much more mature than that and substantive to that. And I think these verses speak to that.
Very good. I mean, who here has left a party? And I'm not talking about just some raucous drinking party. I'm talking about just a good, festive fellowship. Could be with Christian friends. And at the end of that great, enjoyable time, have you left with the deep thoughts of, my life's really not headed the right direction. I really need to straighten things up. Maybe. But how much more likely are you to leave a funeral, especially of a godly person, and say, my life's not headed the right direction. I need to straighten this up. I need to refocus myself because I'm about to be there. I mean, which one gives you more clarity and soundness of mind? So, the funeral gets us to consider the end of our life and where we're headed rather than the joy of the moment. It's that long-term view. I like the way you phrase that, Todd, the generational view. And it's especially helpful when we think back. I went to my mom's funeral not too long ago, so a few months back, and it was really encouraging to hear things that my sisters wrote about my mom. And to have them recount to me, because I was the latecomer in the family. I was a little baby. And some of them were already grown. Matter of fact, by the time I was 3, I had a couple sisters already married and out of the house. So to hear them tell me what it was like with Mom was encouraging. It was interesting to hear things I never would have known about and give me good things to think of. Okay, it's better for a man to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of fools. This also is vanity. Explain the imagery here. I think he's giving us some pretty vivid imagery. Took me a while to think it through. It didn't just come to me. Okay, Marilyn?
Well, I think that's an interesting description, crackling of thorns under a pot. If you have ever been out to eat and there are people over there drinking and the way they're laughing is just, that's a pretty good description of that right there,
Yeah. All right. Okay, Brother Tim?
Yeah, supposedly, thorns, when they burn hot and fast. So maybe like the laughter of fools, it's quick and gone rather than long term. In Proverbs 27:8, faithful are the wounds of a friend, profuse are the kisses of an enemy. So there's nothing like pain to get your attention, and a true friend will tell you the way it needs to be, like it or not, because I care for you.
Very good. How many of you feel like we live in an era when telling people the truth is a bad thing? We live in an era of helicopter moms. You know, don't dare tell my child they're not living up to their expectations. Don't dare make my child feel bad. You're hurting their self-esteem. I remember when I was coming up, around the time I was in high school, I recall a lot of discussions on the airwaves. My dad was a public high school teacher. A lot of discussion about we've got to lift up kids' self-esteem. We have too many children being raised without a high enough self-esteem. We've got to lift it up, and what better way to do it than to tell them how great they are when they're sitting down doing nothing. And my dad was raised up in the era where he told me when he was, not saying this is the greatest thing, but he said when he was starting out as a high school teacher, he said he lined up the whole football team, and he ended up, at the end of the lineup, he had a bloody hand because he had a wooden paddle, and he gave them all a good beating because they weren't acting right. That was the era he came up with, is let me tell you how to get better self-esteem. I'm going to tell you how to be better. Then you'll get better self-esteem. Now, he didn't always have the right approach. There has to be a blend of how you handle that. But I think, you know, if you think about it, I mean, I just think, what's better? A coach whose goal is to maintain your self-esteem by praising everything you do, even when you're lazy, even when you make silly mistakes? Or would we all, in retrospect, who do we have more respect for? The coach that ends up making you better and the best you can be by rebuking you when you need it, right in your face sometimes. Maybe we don't like the approach, but we know the goal and heart of that coach is, I'm going to make you better. I don't care how you feel right now. I care who you are. And they point out your mistakes as well as pointing out the right way to do things. And they won't accept less than that from you. I feel like we live in an era of fools. And I look in a lot of places where everyone's afraid we have to dance around everyone else because we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, because that's the absolute worst thing in the world you can do, is hurt somebody's feelings. So anyway, this one hits home with me a little bit here. Any other thoughts on this? Okay.
Just in a mom scenario, mom and dad, yesterday, we were having our kids get ready to help work around the house. And so we had told them, hey, you can earn money for camp if you go wash our cars. We'll pay this much for one car and this much for the other car. Or you could go clean the porch, which is their area. That's where they hang out. That's what they do. So that's their area. They're responsible for it. So I had one kid, I'm going to go earn the money. I want to work. I want to work hard. Out the door, working hard, out there. The other kid's like, I think I'll take the porch. I'm going to do the porch. And 2 hours have gone by, and they've got like one little area barely completed. And as a parent, you're like, I am so frustrated. I am going to lose my mind. But it ended up, we did have a little discussion with the one who was slacking off, and then we went and praised the one who was doing the work hard and earning what they did, and explained, do you see the difference? And this one was earning money because she had, y'all know who it is. Anyway, because she had something to pay off, and she wanted to work hard to earn that. And the other one was a little bit more lackadaisical, and we were trying to explain that that's not how it works. You have to put more into it. Life doesn't let you be lazy. If you want to succeed, you have to move forward and do things to get accomplished. So there was a whole discussion, and a lot of things were said about mom being angry or dad being fussy. And so sometimes you get those rebukes from the people you're talking to, trying to help, but they're not seeing the bigger picture too.
Very good. And, you know, just thinking of parenting, anybody who has more than one kid, you know that there are situations where it's not only warranted, it's required to praise one while rebuking the other at the same time. Because one's doing right and the other is just knuckleheaded, right? And you gotta straighten them up. But think for yourself, who would you, if you really have a struggle in life, you really are in a tight spot, who do you want to go to first? That person who you knew had your back because they told you what you needed to hear even when you never wanted to hear it and you were angry for a long time, or the person who always told you how wonderful you are when you were the biggest jerk in the world? Which one did you want to go to? And I've seen that through my life, where there are people who aren't spewing out indiscriminate praise, but those are the people that are being sought out when hard times hit. Because people understand all this praising for nothing, that's foolishness. That's the crackling of thorns under the pot. That doesn't deliver anything. But your kids, though they're upset at the time, they respect you for it later. Amy?
And we need to be examples of being willing to receive, criticism or rebuke from, just as a couple, sometimes we have to do that with each other and be an example of that. And sometimes we need to, as long as our children are coming to us respectfully, as I tell them, they please come tell me, you can come talk to me.
Right.
And be willing to receive whatever they might need from us or aren't getting or need to tell me or something. So it's important that we model that, obviously. And also,
That's really good.
when we are trying to admonish our children, when one is doing great and the other is really slacking, that you want to be sure that they understand when we're admonishing them how much we love them. And it's, and we've been there. We all need the chastening of our parents and the discipline of our parents to grow, but it has to be in love like our Lord does
Right.
for us through Jesus.
Very good. Very good. All right. Surely oppression drives the wise into madness, and a bribe corrupts the heart. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Can you think of any examples of this? Without getting political, someone says the government, right? But is that not true? Wise people, do they relish being oppressive and dictatorial? I mean, maybe I'm having the wrong take on this verse in particular and where Solomon's going, but I know that he does talk earlier about the governance of things. And I think there's nothing worse for someone who's wise than to see people in charge ruling by oppression, rather than ruling through encouragement, leadership, yes, sometimes rebuke, but ruling people as people who have individual choices, rather than do it my way or we'll put you in jail. And bribing, of course, it's so corrupting. It's so evil in so many ways. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I don't know for sure this is where he's going on this verse, but it's where I'm going, so surely it's where he's going. It's corruptive. It's not only the oppressor and the briber who are corrupt, but they corrupt other people. So
Yes.
it's the wise man who's driven into something worse than that by the corruption around, by the oppression around him. And it's the heart, the bribe person is corrupted already, but bribery corrupts other people. So it's this contagion that's involved in this as well that I think
Yes.
he's observed.
Very good. I agree with you. I do think that's where he's going with it. Okay. Oh, another comment? Go ahead.
We were just talking earlier about telling kids that they're perfect all the time, that they've done the right thing no matter what they do, building up their self-esteem. In my mind, that's bribery. When you tell a child something that is not true just to get them to do what you want them to do, or it's bribery, and it's not good for their heart. It corrupts them. They get this sense of self-entitlement, and they're not the kind of person that you want them to be.
I'll make a quick. Oh, Tim, go ahead.
A counterpoint to that, no, not really. If you are a person in the church and you've had a good bit of learning or know enough, there's nothing more maddening than trying to talk to your family and they just keep coming back with, well, God loves us and we're saved by grace and we don't need to do anything that God asks us to do. So it's a dangerous thing for us to be careful about that as far as speaking with grace and love and truth, which we're supposed to. But for someone who's truly wise, and that, you know how it is, if something is said 10 times or 7 times or 8 times in the media, then it's true. So when all this is going around the world about truth, about politicians or people, and then there are some people that know that that's not true, it's just when you're overwhelmed constantly in a barrage with, falsehoods, it's just, it tears you up. You have to be strong. So.
Yep. Okay, one more comment here? Oh, no? Okay. I'll make a quick statement, and I don't want to delve into this whole topic here, but if you look at this idea of the praise of fools, I look at where our younger generation is right now with the whole issue of transgender identity. And the idea that how dare you tell me that because I have certain body parts and I was born a certain way that means I'm a man. I think I'm a woman. And how dare you tell me anything different? And the same thing with females in the reverse. And it's true insanity. But I think it's not totally, but a good part of why we are where we are is a bunch of people telling people you can be anything you want to be, no matter what you put into it, no matter how you're born, no matter anything, and you're wonderful just because you exist, which none of that's true. And yet we feed people this garbage and it destroys the mind. It corrupts everything. Anyway, I don't want to delve into that whole issue, but I just made me think of that. Tom?
Bill, I was just sitting here thinking, I'm struggling with understanding the word wisdom used in connection with corruption and oppression. It seems to me like wisdom is the proper use of knowledge and understanding applied. And so I can't, it seems like to me it's the wrong use of the word maybe, and I'm just throwing this out here because my whole understanding of wisdom is knowledge plus understanding and application, meaning that you've come to the right conclusion. You're using your knowledge. It seems like we're talking about a person who is knowledgeable, not necessarily wise. They may know a whole lot, but that in that context I can understand, but I have a hard time understanding where the writer is going with.
Well, I think in this case of surely oppression drives the wise into madness and a bribe corrupts the heart, I don't think the idea here is that a person shrewd enough to know how to corrupt people and give bribes, grease the palms, in places. But I think the idea is that for the truly wise person, it drives them bonkers. And it corrupts them if they get involved in this. It is truly corrupting. You can't, I think you're absolutely right. You cannot stay wise and be involved in either oppression or corruption or bribing. It just can't happen. Cannot happen. And we have one more comment and then we'll move on to the next one. In the back here.
In Leviticus 6, starting in verse 4, it tells us, if he has sinned and has realized his guilt and will restore what he took by robbery or by what he got by oppression or the deposit that was committed to him or the lost thing that he found. Right here is talking about the oppression is like extortion or holding something over somebody. And if you're in wisdom, if you're a wise person, you've done this thing, you've caused this, you've committed this sin, it will drive you into madness because you've realized that what you've done is wrong and you're sitting on this wrong thing that you've committed and you haven't righted it yet. It's still a wrong. But if he has sinned and realized his guilt and will restore what he took by robbery, so that's what the wise person's done, and it will drive him mad. But the wisdom is that you correct that behavior, you stop whatever it was that you were doing, you stop the oppression, you stop the bribery, you stop the evil behavior.
Okay, that's another good take on it. I see where you're going with that, which is this is talking about someone who had wisdom and got involved in oppression by taking bribes and by stealing from people, but then he repented of it, because if you don't repent of it, it's going to drive you crazy. Knowing the right thing and doing the wrong thing. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that you could look at it also from the perspective of Solomon himself, he was wise, and all of this stuff was driving him madness, especially if you don't have the perspective of God. So without that, it becomes vanity and vanity of vanity, and so no matter how wise you are, it's striving after to win.
Okay, very good. Let's go to the next one here. Better is the end of a thing than its beginning, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Now, I liked the kind of take that Wilson Adams had on this, is we tend to pray about a problem, wait 20 minutes. Well, I guess God's not going to answer me today. He must mean for me to leave it all in my own hands, because I've waited. Boy, I've waited. And then we decide that we have to act. How does that usually work out for us? Can y'all think of examples of this?
The beginning part where it says better is the end of a thing than its beginning. I thought of two different things. So I thought of procrastinating, and I like to joke and say I'm the world's best procrastinator, which is not real. But I think of that, like, I need to just get it done. It feels so much better when you just do the work and get it over with, But I also thought about, on a deeper level, of like us trying to have a baby for we were trying to get pregnant for 15 years, and it finally worked out. I'm finally pregnant, and I'm just like, it's so much better than the struggle. You know what I mean? Like the heartache and all the things we went through. And I feel like I want to cry every time we're at church and we're singing songs. I think about how my baby can hear me singing and can hear the church, and so I just think of that.
That's a great perspective. Very good perspective to share. I think of the story of Abraham and Sarah, and think of the impatience there. Now, I got to tread very lightly here, because over 15 years of waiting is waiting quite a while. And they waited for a long time. But because of their rash action, Sarah's rash action, and Abraham's acquiescing to her suggestion of, oh, just take my handmaid here. Why don't you go ahead and have a baby with her? Surely that must be what God wants, because it's not working through me. And think of all the lifelong conflict we've had that's arisen out of that. I mean, not a good thing at all. Okay, we'll get through another one here. Be not quick in your spirit to become angry, for anger lodges in the heart of fools. I mean, that one, it's, I'm sure we've all known people that are very emotionally reactive, where their emotions are acted upon before they're fully processed in their mind. I mean, how many of us have known people that act rashly, say things in anger or frustration or in the heat of the moment, only to a day or two later to turn back around and lament at the destruction they've caused? I mean, I've seen it. I've known people that have succumbed to that. And it's a very dangerous thing. Dangerous to relationships, dangerous in all kinds of ways. There's a part of this wisdom that's patient and that takes time to process through the emotions before acting on them in all kinds of ways. Let's see if we can get through this. Say not, why were the former days better than these? For it is not from wisdom that you ask this. I think of the proverbial, the story of, back in my day, we walked 5 miles to school, uphill, through the snow, both ways. You guys are a bunch of sissies. This is the opposite of that. It's saying, look, don't look back on the old days and say, man, I wish I were back there. How many of us have felt that? I'll raise my hand. I have felt that. Thinking back to when I was a kid, like, man, life was so much easier. My parents could let me ride my bike out of their sight and let me stay gone as long as they said, look, it's 2 o'clock, the sun's shining. When you see that sun starting to come down, it's dinner time, you better be here at home. I didn't have a cell phone, no tracking device. And I thought, man, that's pretty cool. I would not dare let my kids do that. Wouldn't dare. I mean, I'm talking, I was doing that when I was like 11 or 12 years old. It's different. But why? So why is it not good to be thinking about the former days and how much better they are than today? Why is that not good? Or do we all think it's true and it is good? Is there any wisdom here that Solomon's trying to relay to us? Okay. Go ahead.
Part of it may be bad memory. You know, we forget all the toil at the time.
Yeah.
And we can look back and see what we accomplished, and that was good, and got through it, and we lived, and we didn't have hardly anything, but we raised 3 kids, and we had 1 bathroom in the house, if you can imagine. You know, so, but we already talked about being content. So we're always looking back or always looking forward. We really don't enjoy the day God has given us.
Right. Jeannie?
That kind of attitude doesn't promote gratitude, and we're to live in the present. We need to learn from what happened in the past, and learn from our mistakes, learn from the good things that we did that produce fruit. But it honestly, that kind of statement kind of moves us towards self-pity, which then becomes sinful.
Right.
So.
Very good. How many here have ever tried or would be willing to try driving forward while looking through the rearview mirror? How good would that turn out? I think there's a lot of Solomon saying, look guys, that's not, it goes back to what Jeannie's saying, that's not the way to live by dwelling on the past.
Yeah, a little reminiscing is good, to think about what your life was like, to remember what it was like in your earlier days. But you got to move forward. I can't do anything about the past. It's over. The lessons that I've learned, hopefully I've learned, let me now apply these to the things I'm going to do in my future.
Very good. That's right. Okay. Hit both of y'all.
Can't bring a scripture, but you know that, but we do need to hang on to the ancient words of God. Those are in the past, and they also are in the present.
Right. This is certainly not diminishing the beauty of ancient timeless truths in any way, shape, or form. This is just talking about looking back in the past. My situational position was so much better back then. That's the danger. Amy?
Well, and I think like James tells us to rejoice in trials. I think about the Israelites. He had them in the wilderness, and they were just always complaining about going back. I mean, they completely forgot they're throwing their sons in the river, you know.
Yeah.
How could you want to go back to that? Look at what God's doing to bless your life. Even though it's hard, He is preparing you for something wonderful.
Very
His
good.
rest that He said. And they just wouldn't see it, and they wouldn't believe it. And we have to learn from that, from those ancient words that we.
Very good. Real quick.
Just the whole wilderness came after that. You know, I mean, they went through the wilderness because they wouldn't believe to start with. And a lot of times we're not trusting God, and so He gives us our wilderness. But we can find joy in the wilderness. But He's leading us to the promised land, so we have to be able to see Him in all of it.
Right. See Him where we are today and look forward to where He's taking us tomorrow. Very good. I appreciate it, everyone.